It was a Tuesday, 2:47 in the afternoon. I remember the exact time because I'd just gotten back to my desk from a vendor call that had run 18 minutes over, and I was already behind on a freight reconciliation that was due before end of business. My coffee was cold. My inbox had 43 unread messages. And my phone, sitting face up next to my keyboard, lit up with a push notification from my banking app. Transaction alert. $1,412.38. Suncoast Travel and Bookings. I stared at it for a second. Then I picked up the phone. I had never heard of Suncoast Travel and Bookings. I had made no travel plans. I had not been on any booking site. I had not, at any point in the previous 48 hours, spent $1,400 on anything. My stomach dropped the way it does when you already know something is wrong but your brain is still 2 steps behind your gut. Open the app. The charge was sitting there, crisp and confirmed, time-stamped 1:04 p.m., while I had been on that vendor call. While my purse had been sitting, unattended, in the break room, because our office building runs at about 68 degrees year-round and I'd gone to grab it during a morning coffee run and just left it there like I always do. I called the bank's fraud line immediately. Got put on hold. And that is when my phone started ringing. I let it go. Rang again. I let it go again. By the time the fraud representative picked up, I had 7 missed calls. By the time I had finished explaining that I had not authorized a charge to Suncoast Travel and Bookings, I had 14. By the time the rep had flagged the transaction and told me a new card would arrive in 5 to 7 business days, I had 22 missed calls, all from the same number, all within the span of 41 minutes. 22 calls. I want you to sit with that number for a second. Not a text. Not a voicemail first. Not a single, "Hey, are you busy?" 22 consecutive calls from a woman who, I already knew in my gut, had just spent my money and was now trying to get ahead of it. I didn't listen to the voicemails that night. I went back to my desk. I finished my reconciliation. I ate a sad desk lunch at 4 p.m. And I drove home in total silence because I had learned a long time ago that the first move you make when you're angry is almost never the right one. But here is what I want you to understand before we go any further. This was not the first time. It was just the first time I was ready. My name is Danny. Danielle if we're being formal, which my family never is. Not with me anyway. I'm 29 years old. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment about 40 minutes from where I grew up, which is a distance I chose carefully and will explain shortly. I work as a senior logistics coordinator for a freight and distribution company. What that means practically is that I spend my days managing vendor contracts, tracking compliance timelines, and making sure that when something goes wrong in a supply chain, and something always goes wrong, there is documentation to prove exactly where it went wrong, exactly who authorized what, and exactly what the paper trail says versus what someone claims it says. I am very good at my job. I am also, as it turns out, very good at the skill my job requires most. Not reacting until I have the full picture. I grew up in a household of 3. My mother, whose name is Renata but who I've called Mom my entire life in the warm, automatic way you do before you understand that a title is not the same as a role. My sister Priya, who is 26, and who has always been. This is not bitterness, this is just an observable fact. My mother's favorite. Me. My father left when I was 12. He didn't disappear dramatically. He just gradually wasn't there anymore. Weekend visits that became monthly, then quarterly, then a card at Christmas with a 20 inside it that stopped coming around the time I turned 16. My mother raised us alone, and I want to be honest about that because she did work hard. She did sacrifice. She did go without things so that we had things. That part is real. But there is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being raised in a household where your sacrifice is recognized and your sister's is invisible, because your sister never sacrifices anything. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being the child who is told, implicitly and explicitly, that you are the capable one, the strong one, the one who doesn't need as much, and then watching that narrative be used again and again as the justification for taking more from you and giving more to her. I graduated from a state university with a degree in supply chain management and a $14,000 student loan that I took out and paid off myself. I got my first apartment at 23. I have a 741 credit score that I built entirely from scratch, with no co-signers, no parental guarantees, no financial gifts. I have a savings account that I contribute to every single pay period, automatically, the morning after payday, before I let myself spend $1 on anything else. I say all of this not to perform financial virtue. I say it because you need to understand what $1,412.38 actually meant to me, and what it meant that someone who knew exactly what my financial discipline cost me walked into a break room, opened my purse, and spent it on a beach vacation for my sister without asking me a single question, and then called me 22 times to explain why that was okay. That was Renata's move. That was always Renata's move. Not guilt after the fact. Guilt as a preemptive strategy. Get ahead of the anger. Flood the line. Make the person you hurt spend so much energy managing your distress that they never get around to addressing the actual harm. But I had learned by 29 to let the phone ring. Here is what you need to know about Priya. She is not a villain. She is a 26-year-old woman who was never taught that other people's resources have limits, because no one ever let her feel those limits. She has worked 3 jobs in 4 years, each one lasting between 4 and 11 months. She lives at home. She has never paid rent. She has, to my knowledge, never had a savings account with more than $300 in it. And she has never, not once in my adult memory, been told no by our mother. So when I say this wasn't a surprise, I mean it. I had a whole history filed away. I just hadn't decided until that Tuesday afternoon what I was going to do with it. That was about to change. Here's something I've noticed about families where one person is consistently taken from. Nobody keeps score out loud. The person being taken from learns very early that naming what's happening is what gets called dramatic. You say, "You took something from me," and they say, "I can't believe how selfish you've become." So you stop naming it. But you don't stop noticing. I noticed everything. And by the time my card was stolen on a Tuesday in October, I had 3 years of notations in a notes app on my phone. Dates, amounts, incidents, that I had been adding to quietly, the way you do when part of you knows, somewhere deep and patient, that the reckoning is coming and you want to be ready. Let me tell you about 3 of those entries. Entry 1. April 2 years ago. Amount involved, $800. Priya was accepted into a certification program for medical billing and coding. It was a good program. 12 weeks accredited would have genuinely helped her employment stability. The tuition was $1,600. My mother called me 2 weeks before the program started and told me she'd already committed Priya to enrolling, but that she'd come up short on the payment. She asked me to cover half. She said she'd pay me back within 60 days. Said yes. 'Cause I loved my sister. Because I believed my mother. Because $800 was painful but survivable. 60 days passed. Then 90. Then 6 months. I brought it up once, carefully, during a Sunday dinner. My mother looked at me across the table and said, and I remember this precisely because I wrote it down that same night, "Danny, I just think it's sad that you're counting money between family." Priya did not look up from her plate. The $800 was never repaid. Priya did not complete the certification program. She withdrew in week 7, citing stress. I did not bring it up again. I just opened my notes app and typed the date, the amount, and the quote. Entry 2. The following January. Amount involved, $1,200. I was in the process of signing a lease on my current apartment. I had the first month's rent and security deposit ready. $2,400 total, saved over 14 months, sitting in a separate account I'd labeled Move Out Fund and touched for nothing else. I had been very private about this account. Thought. For days before I was supposed to sign, my mother called me and told me she was behind on the electric bill, $340, and that if she didn't pay it by Friday, they'd disconnect the service. She was crying. She said she didn't know who else to call. I transferred the $340 that afternoon. That's not the entry. 2 weeks after I moved in, I was talking to my cousin Lena at a family cookout, and she mentioned, offhandedly, that Priya had gotten a new phone that month. A new phone and new wireless earbuds. She'd seen them on Priya's Instagram. I did the math quietly. The electric bill my mother had described, the one that would have gotten the lights cut off, ran $340. The phone Priya was photographed holding retailed for $289. The earbuds she was wearing in the same photo were $79. I am not saying my mother lied to me. I am saying that the math never added up, and that I was the only one who noticed, and that I was the only one who would ever think to look. Entry 2, $340. January. Phone in photo posted 12 days later. No follow-up, no repayment mentioned. Entry 3. 8 months ago. No dollar amount. Just damage. Priya applied for a car loan. Her credit was thin. Not bad, just young and underbuilt. The lender flagged it. My mother asked me to co-sign. Said no. This was the first time I had said no clearly, without a reason attached, without a softening clause. Just, no, I'm not comfortable co-signing. What happened next is what entry 3 is actually about. My mother called my Aunt Gloria and told her that I had refused to help my sister out of jealousy. That I didn't want Priya to have nice things because I'd always resented being the less pretty one. She said, according to Gloria, that she'd raised 2 daughters and one of them had a good heart and one of them had let success make her cold. I found out about this conversation 3 weeks later when Gloria called to ask if I was going through something. I told Gloria I was fine. Hung up. I opened my notes app. That entry doesn't have a dollar amount. It has a label. Reputation damage. Preemptive. Unprovoked. File that I want to pause here and talk to you for a second because if you're still listening, I have a feeling you recognize some of this. You know what it's like to be the capable one in a family that treats capability like an open tab. You know what it's like to say yes the first time and the second time, and to watch the ask get larger every single time because the yes trained them to expect it. And you know maybe what it's like to finally feel something shift inside you. Not rage exactly, but something quieter and more certain than rage. Something that says, not anymore. That shift happened for me on a Tuesday at 2:47 p.m., when my banking app told me that someone had decided, without asking, that my money was theirs to use. And then my phone rang 22 times. I had 3 years of entries. I had a notes app full of dates and amounts and quotes. And I had finally a transaction record that the bank could see. This time I had receipts. Literal ones. But I still didn't know, not yet, just how much deeper this went. That part one wouldn't find out until I pulled my credit report. And when I did, I went completely stilled. I listened to the voicemails on a Wednesday morning. Not the night it happened. Not even first thing Wednesday. I made my coffee first. I made my bed. I did my 7-minute stretching routine that I have done every single morning for the past 2 years because my therapist told me that grounding your body before you engage with something emotionally difficult is not weakness. It is strategy. I ate half a banana standing over my kitchen sink. I watched a garbage truck make its slow, indifferent way down my street. And then I sat down at my kitchen table, put in one earbud. Just one, I don't know why, some instinct toward keeping one ear in the real world, and I pressed play. I want to walk you through these voicemails carefully because they are not just messages. They are a masterclass. They are the kind of communication that takes years of practice to produce. Not conscious practice, not deliberate study, but the accumulated, automatic fluency of someone who has been managing people's emotional responses to her behavior for a very long time. Took notes. Course I took notes. Voicemail 1. 1:09 p.m. Duration, 47 seconds. Danny, it's Mom. Call me back when you get a chance, okay? It's not urgent, I wanted to talk to you about something. Bae. Love you. Call me. Visual. Like. The voice of a woman who has done nothing wrong. The duration is important. 47 seconds means she didn't ramble, didn't over-explain, didn't fill the silence with justification. This was a controlled opening move. She wanted me to call back before I'd had time to check my banking app. She wanted to get there first. I had already checked my banking app. Voicemail 2. 1:14 p.m. Duration, 1 minute, 12 seconds. Danny, hey, it's me again. I'm just calling because I wanted to explain something before. I'm sure you probably saw something on your account, and I just want you to know that I was going to tell you. I just needed to handle it first, and then I was going to explain the whole thing. It was for Priya. She really needed this. She's been going through so much, and I knew if I asked you first you would have said no, and I thought if I just handled it you'd understand once you saw how happy she was. Bae. Call me. There it is. Right there, in voicemail 2. I knew if I asked you first you would have said no. I want you to understand what that sentence is. That sentence is a confession and a justification living in the same breath. She knew. She knew I would have said no. She knew my answer before she went into my purse. Which means the question was never about asking me. It was about bypassing me, because my no was an inconvenience she had decided in advance not to accept. And then, and this is the part one need you to hear, she framed that bypass as something she did for me. As if removing my choice from the equation was an act of consideration. I wrote that sentence down verbatim. Timestamp. Voicemails 3 through 9. 1:18 p.m. to 2:02 p.m. This is where the volume increased. Not the emotional volume, the literal call volume. 7 calls in 44 minutes. Most of the voicemails in this stretch were short. Call me back. Danny, please call me. I really need to talk to you. 2 of them had background noise. I could hear the television, some daytime talk show, the particular frequency of a house where no one is at work at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday. I noted that detail too, though I wasn't sure yet why it mattered. Voicemail 10. 2:11 p.m. Duration, 2 minutes, 58 seconds. This is the one. Danielle. I don't know why you're not picking up, but I need you to understand something. I am your mother. I have given up things for you that you don't even know about. You think everything you have you built by yourself, but I was there. I was always there. And now your sister, Danny, not a stranger, your blood, needed one thing. One thing. A little break, some time away. She has been so depressed. She hasn't been herself in months, and I am scared for her, and I didn't know what else to do, and I needed to do something for her. And I used your card because I knew you had the money, and I knew you wouldn't miss it the way we would miss it. You have savings. You have your account. You're fine. You've always been fine. And I need you to not make this into something ugly. Please don't make this ugly. Call me back. I had to pause it 3 times. Not because I was crying. I want to be clear about that. I paused it because there was so much in those 2 minutes and 58 seconds that I needed to capture. Not feel, capture. I was listening to it the way I listen to a vendor dispute call at work, the way I am trained to listen. For the claim, for the concession, for the liability language, for the moment someone says something that will matter later. I knew you had the money, and I knew you wouldn't miss it the way we would miss it. That sentence is the architecture of every financial violation that had ever happened between us. That sentence explained the $800 that was never repaid and the $340 that bought a phone and the cosign request and every single entry in my notes app. She had constructed, somewhere in the logic of her relationship with me, a belief that my discipline was a surplus, that my savings were community property, that the gap between what I had and what Priya had was a problem I was obligated to solve, silently, repeatedly, without complaint, because I was fine. I had always been fine. The cruelty of that framing is so specific, so particular to a certain kind of family dynamic, that I almost want to stop and name it directly. There is a tax that gets levied on competent people in struggling families. It is not called a tax. It is called love or loyalty or what family does. But it functions like a tax, extracted without consent, non-negotiable, and somehow always owed by the person who can least afford to keep paying it without anyone noticing the cost. Press play again. Voicemails 11 through 17. 2:15 p.m. to 2:38 p.m. The register changed here. The justification phase was over. What followed was the escalation phase, which I have come to understand is the second movement in my mother's particular emotional symphony. I cannot believe you're doing this to me. Your sister is going to be devastated. I raised you better than this, Danny. I really did. Do you know how embarrassing it is to call your own daughter and get voicemail? Do you know what that feels like? I do know what it feels like to call someone and get voicemail. I know what it feels like to reach out and be met with silence. I have felt that, not from my mother choosing not to answer, but from my mother choosing not to notice. But I did not say that on a voicemail. I had never said that to her at all. I wrote down the phrase, "I raised you better than this," and underlined it. Because there is a particular thing that happens when a parent uses that line as a defensive weapon. It reframes the harm they caused as evidence of your failure, your ingratitude, your moral shortfall. The sentence is not about raising. It is about reversing. It is an attempt to make the person who was harmed responsible for the quality of their own response to being harmed. I see that move clearly now. I couldn't always. Voicemail 18. 2:51 p.m. Duration, 4 minutes 1 second. Priya. Her voice was quieter than my mother's. More careful. Priya is not aggressive in the way my mother can be. She operates differently, in the particular key of someone who has learned that softness gets her further than volume. Danny, it's me. Mom told me what happened and I want you to know I didn't ask her to do that. I wouldn't have wanted her to do it like that. I know that's probably hard to believe right now, but it's true. I've just been really struggling lately and Mom got scared and she does things sometimes without thinking them through. You know how she is. I really hope you're not too mad. We can figure this out. I can pay you back a little at a time. I just really needed this trip, Danny. I really needed it. Babe. Love you. Please call us back. Played that one twice. 'Cause it is almost perfect. It is an apology that contains no actual accountability. It is a distancing move disguised as empathy. I didn't ask her to. That simultaneously excuses Priya from responsibility while keeping her attached to the benefit. It acknowledges that I might be upset, validates that upset just enough to seem reasonable, and then redirects the emotional weight back onto Priya's need. I really needed this trip, Danny. Not, I'm sorry you were stolen from. Not, what can I do to fix this? Just, I needed it and I hope you understand. And then, a little at a time. $800 2 years ago. Still not repaid, not even a little at a time. That repayment plan had a track record, and the track record was 0. Voicemails 19 through 21. 2:53 p.m. to 3:11 p.m. My mother again. She was crying now, or approximating crying. There is a sound she makes that I have heard since childhood, a kind of wet, hitched breathing that I used to respond to with immediate visceral guilt. Used to. I just don't understand how you can treat your family this way. I'm sitting here crying and you won't even pick up the phone. Danny, I am your mother. Whatever I did it out of love. You have to know that. What I know is this. Love is not a defense. Love is not an explanation. Love does not override consent or ownership or the basic agreement that you do not take what does not belong to you. I have loved people, and I have never once decided that love entitled me to go into their purse. But I wrote it all down. Every word. Every timestamp. Voicemail 22. 3:19 p.m. Duration, 22 seconds. Fine. Don't call back. But I hope you know this is going to hurt this family for a long time. I hope it was worth it to you. End of messages. I sat at my kitchen table for a while after that. Not because I was undone, I wasn't undone. I was doing the thing I do when I've just processed a large amount of information and I need to let it settle before I move. My coffee had gone cold again. Outside, a neighbor's kid was riding a bike in wide, lazy circles in the cul-de-sac. It was 9:47 in the morning and the day was completely ordinary and I had just listened to 22 messages from my family explaining, in rotating registers of manipulation and self-pity, why I should be grateful for being stolen from. My phone buzzed. The family group chat. My mother had posted a paragraph. I won't reproduce the whole thing, but the summary is this. She told my aunts, my cousin Gloria and my grandmother, all of whom are in that chat, that she had made a small mistake and tried to fix it, and that I was refusing to communicate, and that she was worried about me, and that she hoped everyone would pray for our family. She had gotten to the family first. Course she had. This was the playbook. Escalate to the audience before the other party can present their version. Flood the channel. Make your distress the story before their grievance can become the story. My phone started buzzing with responses. Heart emojis. Praying hands. Renata, we love you. Family always works it out. Gloria sent a private message. Danny, what is going on? Call your mother. I set my phone face down. And then I did something I had never done before in any previous version of this kind of family crisis. I did not call. I did not text. I did not go to the group chat and post my side. I did not call Gloria. I did not compose the long explanatory message I had drafted in my head 100 times over the years, the one that laid out every incident, every unreturned dollar, every quiet humiliation, the one I always stopped myself from sending because I knew it would just become ammunition. I did not make a single emotional move. Instead, I opened my laptop. I went to annualcreditreport.com, the official one, the federally mandated free one, and I requested a full credit report from all 3 bureaus. Because something my mother had said in voicemail 10 had been sitting in the back of my mind since I heard it, turning over slowly, like a stone that's heavier than it looks. I knew you had the money. She had gone into my purse. She had taken my card. She had made a $1,412.38 purchase on a travel booking site in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. And something about the ease of it, the lack of hesitation, the pre-formed justification, the way the voicemail sounded like a script she'd rehearsed, at least in outline, made me wonder if this was not the first time she had accessed something of mine without my knowledge. I was not panicking. I was investigating. The credit report loaded in 4 minutes. I scrolled through it slowly, the way I scroll through a vendor compliance report, looking not for what's there, but for what shouldn't be. And then I found it. A store credit card. Opened 26 months ago. My name. At an address I had never lived at. I stopped scrolling. I went very, very still to 26 months. That card had been open for 26 months. 2 years and 2 months of a line of credit existing in my name, attached to my social security number, being used by someone who was not me, at an address I had never lived at, and I had not known. I had not known because I had not looked. Because I had been careful with my own accounts, disciplined with my own spending, and had trusted, the way you trust the floor under your feet without testing it every morning, that the financial identity I had built was only being accessed by me. I was wrong. I want to describe what I felt in that moment, sitting at my kitchen table at 9:51 a.m. on a Wednesday, because I think it matters. It was not rage, not yet. It was something colder and more precise than rage. It was the specific, clarifying feeling of a picture that has been slightly blurry for years suddenly coming into focus. Not because something new appeared in it, but because you finally found the right distance to stand at. Everything I had documented in my notes app, every entry, every date and amount and quoted sentence, rearranged itself in my mind into a different shape. Not a pattern of carelessness. Pattern of access. Someone had been treating my financial identity as a resource for a long time, and the $1,412.38 travel booking was not an isolated incident of bad judgment. It was the most recent withdrawal from an account that had been quietly, systematically tapped for over 2 years. I closed the credit report tab. I opened it again. I needed to look at it a second time to confirm that what I was seeing was real. The card was issued by a regional furniture and home goods retailer, the kind of store that offers financing at checkout, the kind where a store associate can open a line of credit in 3 minutes with a name, a date of birth, and a social security number. The credit limit was $2,500. The current balance was $847. The account had been opened in October 26 months ago, which placed it. I did the math immediately, the way I do math at work without reaching for a calculator. About 6 weeks before Priya moved back home after her second job ended. 6 weeks before Priya moved back home. When furniture would have been rearranged. When a household that had been running lean would have needed things. When my mother, who knew my date of birth and had my social security number written in the small green address book she kept in the kitchen drawer because she'd helped me open my first bank account at 17 and had never, apparently, seen a reason to forget it, I stopped that thought. I needed to be methodical. I went back to the credit report and read the account details carefully, the way I would read a freight contract before signing it, looking for the specific language that would tell me exactly what I was dealing with. Count type. Revolving credit. Count status. Open. Payment history. 7 late payments in the past 24 months, 3 of them more than 30 days late, which had been quietly dragging on a credit score I had spent 6 years building without a single late payment of my own. That last part landed differently than the rest. It wasn't just that someone had opened a card in my name. It was that they had used it, not always paid it on time, and allowed the delinquency to attach itself to my credit history like a footnote I'd never been shown. My 741 credit score, the one I had built from a secured card at 22, maintained through 3 apartment applications and a car loan, protected with the same discipline I applied to everything financial in my life, had been quietly eroded by someone else's payment habits. I sat with that for a moment. Then I got a piece of paper. An actual piece of paper, not a notes app, not a document, a physical piece of lined paper from the notepad I keep next to my laptop for vendor call notes. And I started writing. I should tell you that I have a friend named Camille. We went to college together. She studied pre-law, I studied supply chain. We lived on the same floor sophomore year and have been in each other's lives ever since. Camille is now a paralegal at a consumer rights firm in the city. Not an attorney, she is always precise about that distinction, but someone who spends her days in the specific territory where financial harm and legal remedy overlap, and who has, over the years, answered more of my procedural questions than I probably had any right to ask. I texted her at 10:04 a.m. Hey, do you have 20 minutes sometime today? Not an emergency, but I need to ask you something work adjacent. I said work adjacent because I didn't want to explain it in a text. Camille responded in 6 minutes. She is a fast texter, always has been, and said she had a lunch break at 12:30 and could call then. In the 2.5 hours between that text and that phone call, I did the following things. I pulled up the full account history on my credit report and wrote down, on my piece of lined paper, every transaction I could access. The account opening date, the credit limit, the current balance, the payment history summary, the address associated with the account. The address was my mother's. Her house. The house I grew up in. The house where, 6 weeks before Priya moved back in, someone had opened a furniture store credit line in my name and had been making purchases, and occasionally missing payments for 26 months. I then went through my email, all of it scrolling back 26 months, looking for any account confirmation, any welcome email, any statement notification that might have been sent to me at the time of opening and that I might have missed or dismissed as spam. Found nothing. Which told me something. Whoever opened the account had either used a different email address or had ensured that communications went somewhere I wouldn't see them. The store's credit accounts, I would later learn, defaulted to paper statements unless the customer opted into electronic delivery. Paper statements. Sent to my mother's address. I also, in those 2.5 hours, went back through my banking records for the past 3 years. Not just the recent months, the full 3 years, and flagged every charge I didn't immediately recognize. Most of them resolved easily. A subscription I'd forgotten about, a gas station I didn't immediately place, a restaurant charge from a work lunch paid on the wrong card. But there were 2 charges, separated by about 8 months, that I could not account for. Both were small, $34.50 and $67. Both from retailers I had no memory of shopping at. Both had occurred on weekdays during business hours, when I was at work and my purse had been, as it sometimes was, left in a common area. I added those to my piece of paper. Question marks next to each one. By the time Camille called at 12:31, I had filled both sides of that sheet and started on a second. Okay, she said after I had laid it out for her in the organized sequential way I present information at work. Here's the timeline, here's what I know, here's what I don't know yet, here's the document. Okay. I need you to hear me clearly on a few things. She paused and I could hear her moving, closing a door, I think, going somewhere private on her lunch break. What you're describing with a store card, the unauthorized opening of a credit account in your name using your personal identifying information, that is textbook identity theft. I want to be precise about that word because people use it to mean a lot of things, but legally, specifically, opening a line of credit in someone's name without their knowledge or consent, using their social security number, is identity theft. It does not matter that the person who did it is your mother. It does not matter that they are family. The statute does not have a family exemption. I wrote down, no family exemption. Now, she continued, there are a few directions you can go from here, and I want you to understand what each of them means before you do anything. First direction. You can dispute the account with the credit bureaus and the retailer as fraudulent. You file a dispute, you provide documentation, they investigate, and if they find in your favor, which, given that you have a different address and no record of use, they close the account and remove it from your credit report. That fixes your credit. It does not address the broader situation. What's the second direction? Yes. Second direction, you file a police report. Which I know feels like a big step when we're talking about family, but hear me out because the police report is not primarily about getting someone arrested. The police report creates an official record. It documents, with a case number attached to it, that you reported this as fraudulent. That case number is what you reference in your credit dispute. It is what a consumer rights attorney references if this goes further. It is the foundation everything else builds on. And is there a third direction? Third direction, she said, and her voice shifted slightly, the way it does when she's being careful, is that you consult an actual attorney. Not me, I want to be clear, I am not your attorney, about civil remedies. Because identity theft that results in credit damage has a civil claim attached to it in this state. You can sue for actual damages, the credit score impact, any financial losses you can document. And in some cases, depending on the statute, statutory damages on top of that. That is a real option. I sat with that for a moment. Camille, I said. The travel booking. The $1,412.38 from my debit card. That's separate from the store card. Yes, she said. That's unauthorized use of a financial instrument. Also a crime. Also documentable. Do you have the bank's fraud case number? I did. I had written it down the afternoon before. Good, she said. Keep everything. Every voicemail. Every text. Every screenshot. Every statement. The Notes app, whatever you have, export it, back it up, email it to yourself. If this goes anywhere, the documentation is the difference between a claim and a case. We talked for 47 minutes. She missed most of her lunch break. Before she hung up, she said, Danny, I need to ask you something. Are you okay? I thought about it honestly. I'm not upset, I said. I'm organized. She laughed, a short, real laugh. That's the scariest thing you could have said. After we hung up, I sat for a long time at my kitchen table. I want to tell you something about this moment because I think it is the emotional center of this whole story. More than the voicemails, more than the discovery, more than anything that came after. There is a particular kind of grief that comes not from losing something suddenly, but from realizing that something you thought you had, safety, trust, the basic assumption that the people closest to you operate with some fundamental recognition of your personhood, was never quite what you believed it was. It is not dramatic grief. It does not announce itself loudly. Settles. Takes up space. It asks you to rearrange a lot of things you had organized around a different understanding. I thought about my mother sitting in that house, in front of that daytime television, calling me 22 times. I thought about Priya recording that careful, practiced voicemail. I thought about the furniture store credit card, open for 26 months, accruing balance and late payments in my name while I was at work managing contracts and building a savings account and maintaining a credit score that someone else was quietly, invisibly undermining. I thought about my Notes app. 3 years of entries. Dates and amounts and quotes I had collected without quite knowing why. The way you save something because part of you knows its value even before you can articulate it. I knew now. Closed my laptop. I made lunch. A real lunch, not a desk lunch, not a sad half banana. I ate it at my table, in the quiet of my apartment, in the particular peace of someone who has just gone from having a feeling to having a file. And then I opened a new document on my laptop. Not my notes app. A proper document, named with a date and saved to a folder I labeled with a single word. Evidence. I did not call my mother. I did not respond to the group chat. I did not text Priya back. I did not call Gloria. I did not, in any direction, make a single emotional move. What I did was start building something. And they had no idea. There is a particular discipline required to do nothing visible when everything in you wants to do something loud. I want to be honest about that because I think there is a version of this story that makes the quiet part sound easy. Like I was some kind of emotionally detached operative who felt nothing and executed everything with surgical precision and never once sat on the edge of her bed at 11 o'clock at night wondering if she was making a mistake. That version would be cleaner. It would also be a lie. The truth is that the week after I found the store card was one of the hardest weeks I have had in recent memory. Not because I was devastated. I had moved past devastation somewhere around voicemail 10. But because doing nothing visible while doing everything procedural is an act of sustained, exhausting self-control. Every time my phone buzzed with another message from the family group chat, every time Gloria sent another gentle, well-meaning nudge, every time I saw my mother's name on my screen and felt the old, trained reflex to pick up and smooth things over and be the reasonable one. Every single time I had to make a conscious choice to stay the course. I stayed the course. Let me tell you exactly what that looked like. Wednesday evening. I exported everything from my notes app. 3 years of entries, dates, amounts, quotes. I copied them into my evidence document and organized them chronologically, the way I would organize supporting documentation for a vendor dispute. Each entry got a heading, date, incident description, dollar amount if applicable, witnesses if any, direct quotes where I had them. I added a column I labeled documentation status. Whether each incident was supported by a bank record, a text message, a voicemail, or only my own contemporaneous notes. The $800 from 2 years ago. Bank transfer record still in my transaction history, confirmed. No repayment record because there was none. The $340 electric bill. Bank transfer record confirmed. Cross-referenced with Priya's Instagram post, which I screenshot and saved with the date and timestamp visible. I had not followed Priya on Instagram for 8 months, but her account was public, and the post was still there. Her holding the new phone, the earbuds visible in the background, the caption something about treating yourself. Posted 12 days after I transferred the $340. Save. The cosign refusal and subsequent reputation damage. I had no direct documentation of what my mother said to Gloria. Only Gloria's paraphrased account delivered to me in a phone call. I noted this in the documentation status column as second-hand, unverified. I did not include it in anything I intended to submit formally. I kept it in the document as context only, labeled clearly as such. Camille had been precise about this. The difference between what you know and what you can prove is the difference between a feeling and a case. I was building a case. The $1,412.38 travel booking. Bank fraud case number confirmed. Screenshot of the transaction alert with timestamp. Screenshot of the banking app showing the charge details. The 22 voicemails, saved to my phone and additionally recorded using a call recording app one downloaded that Wednesday afternoon. I exported them as audio files and saved them to a folder in my cloud storage titled, with characteristic understatement, October voicemails. I also transcribed the most legally significant portions, specifically voicemail 2, voicemail 10, and voicemail 18, and included the transcriptions in the evidence document with timestamps. Voicemail 2. I knew if I asked you first you would have said no. That sentence. In writing. Timestamp. Cross-referenced with the audio file. Camille had said, documentation is the difference between a claim and a case. I was starting to understand what she meant in a way that felt less abstract with every item I added to the folder. The store card. I pulled the full credit report again. All 3 bureaus this time, not just the one, and documented the account details from each. I noted the discrepancies. The address associated with the account was my mother's, not mine. The account opening date was 26 months prior. I had no record of applying for the account, no welcome email, no paper statements delivered to any address I had ever lived at. The current balance was $847. The payment history showed 7 late payments. I spent 2 hours that Wednesday evening on the retailer's website, navigating their customer service portal, trying to find the account associated with my social security number. I could not access it directly. The account was linked to an email address I did not recognize, which told me definitively that whoever opened it had used a separate email to manage the account communications. That detail went into the document. Alternate email used at account opening, not linked to any email address belonging to Danielle last name. Suggests deliberate exclusion of account holder from communications. I am very precise with language when I am building a record. The word suggests is doing important work in that sentence. I was careful not to state as fact what I could not yet prove as fact. That would come later, Thursday. Day 3. I called the retailer's fraud department. This took longer than it should have. I was transferred 3 times, placed on hold for a cumulative total of 41 minutes, and asked to verify my identity using information. Specifically, the email address associated with the account that I did not have. I explained calmly to the 3rd representative I spoke with that the reason I did not have the email address associated with the account was that I had not opened the account, that the account had been opened fraudulently in my name, and that I was calling to initiate a fraud claim. The representative's name was Marcus. He was patient and methodical, which I appreciated. He walked me through the fraud claim process. I would need to submit a written dispute, a copy of a government-issued ID, and a police report or FTC identity theft report. Once received, they would freeze the account pending investigation. The investigation timeline was 15 to 30 business days. FTC identity theft report. I had not known before Camille's call that the Federal Trade Commission maintains a specific reporting portal for identity theft, identitytheft.gov, where you can file an official report, generate a personal recovery plan, and receive a report number that functions similarly to a police report for the purposes of credit disputes and fraud claims. Camille had mentioned it as an alternative to a police report for people who were not ready to go that route. The FTC report does not result in an investigation or an arrest. It is a documentation tool, not an enforcement one. But it creates an official federal record with a case number that I could reference in every subsequent dispute. I filed the FTC report on Thursday morning, before I called the retailer. I answered every question carefully. I uploaded the documentation I had. I received a report number and a personalized recovery plan that outlined, step by step, the exact sequence of actions I should take to address the fraudulent account. I printed the recovery plan. I added it to my evidence folder. Then I called Marcus back. I gave him my fraud claim, my FTC report number, and my case number from the bank's fraud department regarding the travel booking charge. I told him I would submit the written dispute and documentation within 48 hours. He notated the account, confirmed the fraud claim was initiated, and told me the account would be flagged pending my documentation submission. Before I hung up, I asked Marcus one more question. Whether the account could be traced to the point-of-sale terminal where it was opened, whether there was a record of which store location had processed the application. There was a pause. That information would be part of the investigation, he said carefully. I understand, I said. I just want to note for the record that I have never been to any location of your store in the city where the account was opened. I live 40 minutes away. I have never had occasion to shop there. If your investigation includes point-of-sale records, I believe that will be consistent with what I'm telling you. Another pause. I'll make sure that's noted in the file, Marcus said. Thanked him. Hung up. I added fraud claim initiated, account flagged, FTC report number provided. Store location discrepancy noted to my evidence document. Thursday afternoon. I submitted the written dispute to the retailer's fraud department. A formal letter, printed on plain paper, signed, scanned, and emailed to the address Marcus had provided. I attached my government-issued ID, my FTC report, and a one-page summary of the fraudulent account details. I kept the letter factual and specific. No emotional language. No family context. Just, this account was opened without my knowledge or consent. Here is the documentation. Here is my contact information. I request that this account be frozen pending investigation and removed from my credit report upon finding of fraud. I then submitted disputes to all 3 credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, online, through their respective dispute portals. Each dispute referenced the FTC report number, the retailer's fraud case number, and the bank's fraud case number. Each one requested removal of the fraudulent account from my credit history. Each one also flagged the account for the credit score impact assessment, because if the investigation confirmed fraud, which I was confident it would, I would be entitled to have any score damage attributed to the fraudulent account recalculated. That last part mattered to me. Not as revenge. As restoration. That score was mine. I had built it, payment by payment, year by year, the slow and undramatic way that financial security actually gets built. Having it quietly eroded by someone else's payment habits, and then having it restored officially, formally with documentation, felt like getting back something that had been taken from me in a way I hadn't even known to defend against. The disputes were submitted by Thursday at 3:15 p.m. I made a note of the submission times. Thursday evening. The attorney call. Camille had given me the name of a consumer rights attorney at a firm that handled identity theft and credit fraud cases. Many consumer rights attorneys offer free initial consultations. This is not widely known, but it is true, and it is worth knowing, because a significant portion of consumer protection law operates on a contingency basis, meaning the attorney's fee comes from the settlement or judgment, not from the client's pocket up front. His name was Mr. Okafor. The consultation was scheduled for 45 minutes. It ran an hour and 12. I presented my documentation the same way I present a vendor dispute at work. Timeline first, then evidence, then the specific harm, then what I was asking for. He listened without interrupting, which told me he was used to letting clients lay things out before he started asking questions. When I finished, he asked 4 questions. I had answers to all 4 because I had anticipated them, because I had spent 3 years, without quite knowing it, preparing to answer exactly these kinds of questions about exactly this situation. The voicemail, he said. The one where she says she knew you'd say no. You have the audio? Exported, backed up in 2 locations, transcribed with timestamp. The transfer records for the previous incidents, the 800 and the 340, those are in your bank history? Screenshots taken, saved to the folder, organized chronologically. The store card. You have the credit report documentation? All 3 bureaus. Disputes submitted this afternoon. He was quiet for a moment. Ms. Danny, he said. He used my first name, which I appreciated. You have done a significant amount of the work already. What I can add to this is a formal demand letter. A legal demand for restitution of the $1,412.38 unauthorized travel charge, sent from this office on firm letterhead, with a 30-day response window and a civil filing notice attached. In my experience, demand letters from a consumer rights firm resolve the majority of cases at this stage without going further. And if it doesn't resolve at this stage, then we file in civil court. Small claims for the travel charge. That's well within the limit. Potentially a larger civil claim if the identity theft investigation confirms damages attributable to the credit score impact. Because at that point we're looking at actual damages plus potential statutory damages under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. He paused. I want to be direct with you about something. This is your family. The person who did this is your mother. The civil and legal remedies I'm describing are real and available to you, but they will have real consequences for your family relationship. I'm not telling you not to pursue them. I'm telling you to be clear with yourself about what outcome you're working toward. I thought about that for a moment. I'm not working toward sending my mother to prison, I said. I'm working toward getting my money back, clearing my credit, and making sure this cannot happen again. Those are my 3 objectives. In that order. He nodded. I could hear it in the pause. Then a demand letter is your starting point. Measured. Documented. It gives her an opportunity to make it right before anything escalates. And it establishes, formally, that you are not going to absorb this quietly. How soon can you send it? I can have a draft to you by Monday. I'll look for it Monday. Friday. Day 4. I sent 1 text. To my mother. 1 message. No preamble, no accusation, no emotional language. I've spoken with an attorney. You'll be receiving a formal letter from their office next week. I'd ask that you not contact me until you've had a chance to read it. I'm not angry. I just need this handled properly. I read it 4 times before I sent it. I wanted to make sure there was nothing in it that could be read as a threat, nothing that was imprecise, nothing that expressed more than I intended to express. It was informational, not confrontational. It was, as Camille would later say when I showed her, almost aggressively reasonable. I sent it at 9:03 a.m. on a Friday. I then turned my phone to Do Not Disturb, went to work, managed my freight reconciliation, reviewed 2 vendor contracts, had a perfectly normal lunch with a coworker named Tessa who had no idea that any of this was happening, and drove home in the early evening listening to a podcast about urban architecture. My phone, when I turned the ringer back on at 7 p.m., had 41 notifications. I did not look at any of them that night. Let me tell you what was happening on their end during this week, because I found out later. Through Gloria, who is constitutionally unable to keep information to herself, which in this case worked in my favor. My mother had received my text at 9:03 a.m. on Friday and had, according to Gloria, immediately called Priya into the kitchen and read it out loud. The word attorney had produced a reaction that my text itself had not. The 22 calls, the voicemails, the group chat escalation, none of that had gotten a response from me. But the word attorney, delivered in 9 words on a Friday morning, had done something the emotional campaign had not. It had made it real. Priya had apparently started crying. My mother had apparently called her sister, my Aunt B, not Gloria, and asked whether she thought I was serious. Aunt B, who is the most practical person in our family and who has always had a quiet, unspoken understanding of the dynamic between me and my mother, had said, according to Gloria, "Renata, Danny doesn't do things she's not serious about. You need to call whoever handled that card and figure out what you're going to do." Gloria told me all of this 3 weeks later. I thanked her for telling me, and I did not tell her what had been happening on my end. Not yet. What I will tell you is this. I had not raised my voice once. I had not sent an accusatory message, had not gone to the group chat, had not called anyone crying, had not shown my hand in any emotional direction. I had filed, documented, disputed, consulted, and sent 9 words on a Friday morning. And that, the 9 words, after 4 days of total silence, had produced more visible alarm in my mother's household than 22 voicemails had produced in mine. There is something clarifying about that inversion. Something that told me, more than anything else in that week, that I had finally found the right register. Not louder. Not more emotional. Just official. Documented. Irreversible. I want to stop here and talk to you directly for a second because I think if you've been listening this long, there's a reason. And I think the reason might be that some version of this is familiar to you. Not the specific details, maybe not the credit card or the voicemails or the store account, but the shape of it. The experience of being the responsible one in a family that treats responsibility as a resource to be extracted. The experience of saying yes until saying yes becomes the only answer you're allowed to give. The experience of finally, quietly, deciding that you are done being the soft place everyone else lands while nobody thinks to ask whether you need somewhere to land too. If that's where you are, I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me earlier. The documentation is not the coldness. The filing is not the betrayal. The act of taking your own harm seriously enough to build a record of it, that is not what broke the family. The family was already broken. You just finally stopped being the person holding the pieces together at your own expense. You are allowed to stop. The weekend. Days 5 and 6. I did 2 things on Saturday. First, I went to my bank in person, not the fraud line, the actual branch, and sat with a personal banker for 35 minutes. I reviewed every transaction in my checking and savings accounts going back 36 months. The 2 unaccounted charges I had flagged, the $34.50 and the $67, were traceable to a clothing retailer and a household goods store respectively. Both were stores located near my mother's house, not near mine. Neither charge had a corresponding receipt in my email, because I had not made either purchase. I opened a secondary fraud claim with the bank, covering both transactions, and added the claim numbers to my evidence document. Second, I changed every password. Email, banking, investment account, benefits portal, everything. I revoked any saved payment methods from any device I did not personally own. I placed a credit freeze with all 3 bureaus. A formal freeze, not a fraud alert, which is a stronger protection and prevents any new credit from being opened in my name without my explicit authorization and a PIN that only I hold. The credit freeze took 11 minutes across all 3 bureaus. 11 minutes to close a door that should have been closed years ago, that I had not known to close because I had not known the door was open. On Sunday, I did something for myself that had nothing to do with any of this. I drove 40 minutes to a state park I had been meaning to visit for 2 years, and I walked a trail for 3 hours by myself. It was cold. The trees had gone mostly bare. My boots were not quite right for the terrain, and I had a blister on my left heel by the end of it. I ate a gas station sandwich on the drive home and listened to music too loud, and I did not think about voicemails or credit reports or demand letters for approximately 4 hours. It was the best 4 hours I'd had in weeks. Monday morning. The draft arrived. Mr. Okafor sent the demand letter draft at 8:47 a.m. It was 2 pages, single-spaced, on firm letterhead. It was the most quietly devastating document I had ever read, and I have read a lot of documents. It named my mother by her full legal name. It cited the specific date and amount of the unauthorized transaction. October date, $1,412.38, Suncoast Travel and Bookings. It cited the voicemail record as documentation of her acknowledgement that she had made the transaction without my consent. Specifically the phrase "I knew if I asked you first you would have said no," which Mr. Okafor had flagged as an admission of unauthorized use. It noted the ongoing fraud investigation regarding the store credit account opened in my name without my knowledge or consent, and stated that the outcome of that investigation was expected to result in additional documented harm. It then stated, clearly and without embellishment, that my mother had 30 days from the date of the letter to remit full restitution of $1,412.38 to my attorney's office, and that failure to do so would result in a civil filing in small claims court and, depending on the outcome of the fraud investigation, potential referral to the appropriate authorities. It closed with a line that I had not written but that I read 3 times. My client wishes to resolve this matter without further escalation. She asks only for what was taken from her to be returned. I emailed Mr. Okafor. Send it. He sent it that afternoon, certified mail, to my mother's address. Return receipt requested. They thought I was sulking. For 10 days, while the group chat continued its slow simmer, while Gloria sent her gentle nudges, while Priya posted vacation content on Instagram from a trip she had apparently taken anyway using money I could not account for. For 10 days, they thought I was doing what I had always done before. Withdrawing, cooling down, waiting to be ready to smooth things over and return to the family fold and absorb the lesson that this was simply how things were. They thought I was sulking. I was building a case. And on a Thursday afternoon, 14 days after a banking app notification had interrupted my vendor call, a certified letter with a return address I did not recognize landed in my mother's mailbox. And everything changed. The return receipt came back signed on a Wednesday. I know this because Mr. Okafor's office scanned it and emailed it to me at 2:14 p.m., and I was again at my desk, managing a freight reconciliation when the notification came through. I opened the email. I looked at the signature on the receipt. My mother's handwriting, which I have known my entire life, the particular looping R she has always made at the start of her name. I saved the email to my evidence folder. I went back to my reconciliation. But I want to tell you what that signature meant to me, practically and precisely, because I think it is important to understand the mechanics of what had just happened. A certified letter with return receipt is not just a piece of mail. It is a legal timestamp. It is documentation that a specific communication was received by a specific person on a specific date. It closes the loop on the question of whether they knew, because they signed for it in their own handwriting, and now there is a federal mail record that confirms it. My mother could no longer claim she hadn't received it. She could no longer claim she didn't know. The 30-day clock had started officially on a Wednesday afternoon, and every day that passed without a response was a day that moved us one step closer to a courthouse. The next 72 hours were the loudest my family had been since I sent the 9-word text. Gloria called me Thursday morning. Not a nudge this time. Gloria's voice had a different quality, the particular tightness of someone who has just learned something that has recontextualized a lot of other things she thought she understood. "Danny," she said, "I just got off the phone with your mother." "Okay," I said. "She got a letter. From a law firm." "She's very upset." "I imagine she is," I said. Another pause longer. "She said you're trying to destroy the family." I had expected some version of this framing, the recast, the repositioning, the transformation of the person who filed into the person who attacked. I had rehearsed my response, not to be cold but to be clear. "Gloria," I said, "I am trying to get back $1,412.38 that was taken from my bank account without my permission. That's the whole story. There's no version of that I'm responsible for framing differently." Silence on the line. "There's also," I said carefully, "a separate matter involving a credit account that was opened in my name without my knowledge. That investigation is ongoing. I can't say more about it right now." I heard Gloria exhale. A long, slow exhale, the kind that means someone is doing significant internal recalibration. "Danny," she said finally, "how long has this been going on?" "A while," I said. "I've been documenting for about 3 years." Another long silence. And then Gloria said something I had not expected. She said, "I owe you an apology. For the cosign thing. For calling you and asking if you were going through something instead of asking your mother what she had said about you. I think I knew something was off and I didn't want to see it." I sat with that for a moment. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. The family group chat, which had been a low simmer of prayer hands and vague supportive messages directed at my mother for 2 weeks, erupted on Thursday afternoon. I know what happened in it because I was still in the chat silently, having made no posts and responded to nothing. I had been reading it the way I read vendor communications during a dispute, observationally, for information without tipping my hand. My mother posted the letter. Not a summary. Not a paraphrase. She photographed it and posted the image directly into the family group chat, apparently believing that sharing it would produce a wave of family outrage directed at me. What it actually produced was the opposite of what she intended, because the letter, Mr. Okafor's precise, factual, unemotional 2 pages, said exactly what had happened in plain language, with a specific dollar amount and the specific legal framing, and several members of my family read it and understood, for the first time, what the situation actually was. Aunt B responded first. Her message was 4 words. "Renata, pay her back." My Uncle Desmond, who I have always liked, a quiet man who says very little and means everything he says, sent a private message to me, not to the group. It said, "I'm sorry this happened to you. You did the right thing." The chat devolved from there in the way that family group chats devolve when something true has been introduced into a space that had been operating on a comfortable fiction. There were people who sided with my mother, framed around the language of family loyalty and forgiveness and not airing grievances publicly. The irony of that last one, given that my mother had posted a legal demand letter to the group chat, apparently escaped them. There were people who went quiet. And there were people, more than I had expected, who said some version of what Aunt B had said to her back. I left the group chat on Thursday evening. Not dramatically, I just quietly exited, the way you leave a room when the conversation has become something you no longer need to be present for. I had gotten what I needed from it. I had seen the letter's contents reach people who had previously only heard my mother's version of events. That was enough. The fraud investigation completed in 19 business days. The retailer's fraud department sent me a formal written finding. The account had been determined to be opened fraudulently, without the knowledge or consent of the account holder. The account was closed. The balance, $847, was written off against the retailer, not against me. A formal letter confirming the fraudulent finding was sent to all 3 credit bureaus, requesting removal of the account and recalculation of any credit score impact attributable to its history. 11 days after that, I checked my credit report. The account was gone. All 3 bureaus clean. And my score, the score I had built from scratch at 22, maintained through 6 years of disciplined, uninterrupted payment history, and watched being quietly eroded by someone else's late payments, had recalculated. Up 17 points from where it had been sitting. I stared at that number for a long time. Not because 17 points is dramatic. In the landscape of credit scores it isn't. But because those 17 points were mine. They had always been mine. They had been quietly taken from me and I had not known, and now they were back, officially, documented, restored. I took a screenshot and saved it to the evidence folder. Then I moved the evidence folder to my archive drive and labeled it closed. Resolved. The 30-day window on the demand letter closed on a Thursday. My mother paid on day 28. Not in person. Not with a phone call. Not with any communication to me directly. She had her sister, not Gloria, the other one, Aunt B, hand-deliver a money order to Mr. Okafor's office for $1,412.38. The exact amount. Not $1 more, not $1 less. Mr. Okafor's office sent me a confirmation email with the money order scanned and attached. The memo line on the money order said, "For Danielle." I read that memo line several times. "For Danielle." Written in my mother's handwriting, the same looping letters I had been seeing my whole life, on birthday cards and grocery lists and the permission slips she signed for school field trips. On a money order, delivered through an attorney's office, 28 days after a certified letter landed in her mailbox. I won't tell you I felt nothing. That would not be true. What I felt was complicated in the way that only family things are complicated. Not triumph, not satisfaction exactly, something quieter and more mixed than either of those. I felt the particular sadness of having been right about something you would have preferred to be wrong about. I felt, underneath that, something that took me a few days to name correctly. Felt free. Not because I had the money back, though I did. Not because my credit was restored, though it was. Not because the letter had been sent and signed for and responded to, though all of that had happened exactly as it needed to. I felt free because for the first time in my adult life, I had treated my own harm as something worth responding to. I had not absorbed it. I had not smoothed it over. I had not been the reasonable one in a way that required me to be unreasonable to myself. I had filed. I had documented. I had waited. And when the moment came, I had let the machinery do what machinery is built to do. Priya's vacation was cancelled. I found this out not from Priya, not from my mother, but from Gloria, who mentioned it in passing 2 weeks after everything had resolved, in the tone of someone who still hasn't quite decided how to feel about it. The chargeback I had filed with my bank on day 1, The standard fraud dispute that the bank's fraud department had processed while I was still building the rest of the case had reversed the $1,412.38 charge from Suncoast Travel and Bookings. When a chargeback is processed by the bank, the merchant is notified and the transaction is reversed. Suncoast Travel and Bookings, upon receiving the chargeback notification, had cancelled the reservation, the flights, the hotel, all of it. I had not planned that specifically. The chargeback was not a strategic move targeting Priya's trip. It was the standard first step in any unauthorized transaction dispute, the thing the bank's fraud representative had walked me through on day one. The cancellation was a consequence of the process, not a design of mine. But I will not pretend I was upset about it. What I will say is this: Priya called me 6 weeks after everything had settled. Not to relitigate it, not to argue. She called me on a Sunday afternoon and she was quiet for a moment after I picked up, and then she said, "I've been thinking a lot. And I want to say I'm sorry. Not for what Mom did, because I can't own that. But for not seeing how much I've been taking you for granted. For a long time. It was not a perfect apology. It was not complete accountability. But it was more than I had expected, and it was real. I could tell it was real because she didn't ask for anything after it. She just said it and let it sit. I appreciate that," I said. And I did. We're not close, Priya and I. Not yet. Maybe not ever, in the way I might have wanted us to be when we were younger. But that call was something. It was a door left slightly open that had been fully closed for a long time, and I decided quietly to leave it that way. Not to walk through it yet, just to let the air in. My mother and I have not spoken since I sent the 9-word text. I want to be accurate about that because I think people expect this kind of story to resolve with a dramatic confrontation, a tearful phone call, a reconciliation scene with hard things said and received and eventually, somehow, absorbed. That has not happened. I do not know if it will happen. I am not, at this point in my life, willing to manufacture a reconciliation for the sake of a narrative shape that makes other people more comfortable with the ending. What I know is this. I am not angry at my mother. Anger, the hot kind, the kind that needs to be expressed and resolved and processed and ultimately released. I think I moved through that somewhere in the middle of transcribing those voicemails at my kitchen table. What I feel toward her now is something more like a clear-eyed recognition of who she is and what our relationship has always been, stripped of the version of it I wanted to believe in. That is not nothing. It is, in its way, a kind of peace. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace of accuracy. The peace of finally seeing something clearly after years of looking at it through the particular distortion of hope. She is my mother. She is also someone who went into my purse, took my card, spent my money, and called me 22 times to explain why I should be grateful for it. Both of those things are true simultaneously. I no longer need to choose between them or resolve them into something more comfortable. I can hold both clearly and decide how much access I give to the relationship based on what it has actually demonstrated rather than what I have wanted it to be. That, more than the $1,412.38, more than the 17 credit score points, more than the certified letter and the demand window and the money order with my name in my mother's handwriting, that is what I got from this. I got to stop pretending. I want to say something to you before I go, because if you've been with me this whole time, I don't think it was just curiosity. I think you know what it's like to be the one who holds things together. The one who says yes because saying no always costs too much. The one who keeps the peace by paying the price. The one who has a notes app full of things they noticed and never said, because naming the pattern was always more dangerous than absorbing it. I want to tell you that the documentation is not the coldness. Keeping the record is not the betrayal. Knowing your own worth clearly enough to act when someone violates it, that is not selfishness, no matter how many times it gets called that by the person who benefited from you not knowing it. The family that calls you selfish for protecting yourself was never actually calling you generous when you didn't. I am 30 years old now. I have a 758 credit score, a savings account I contribute to every payday, and a 1-bedroom apartment that is exactly 40 minutes from where I grew up. I have an evidence folder in my archive drive that I hope I never need to open again. I have a paralegal friend named Camille who I owe a very good dinner. I have an uncle who sent me 4 words on a Thursday evening that I have not forgotten. And I have, for the first time in my adult life, the specific, grounded, unperformative piece of someone who has decided that her own harm is worth taking seriously. Turns out that was the only decision I actually needed to make. The rest was just paperwork called to action. If this story stayed with you, if any part of it felt familiar, if you've ever been the capable one in a family that treated your capability like a resource they were entitled to, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Tell me the moment you decided to stop absorbing it quietly. Tell me what boundary finally felt worth holding. And if you're still in the middle of your version of this, if you're in the part where the calls are still coming and you haven't yet figured out what the quiet move is, I want you to know that the quiet move exists. You don't have to be loud to be serious. You don't have to be dramatic to be clear. You just have to start keeping the record. Subscribe if you want to stay. There's more where this came from. And if you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to know you best, I hope you remember that was never the truth about you.